Jonathan Becher, President, Co-President of the San Jose Sharks. Welcome to Alaska Beyond. So nice to have you here today, sir.
Mike, it's great to be here.
You're just coming off of a NHL Stanley Cup playoff run. Easy for me to say.
Yeah, actually, there's nothing at all like the Stanley Cup. It's fantastic. You have a great time. In fact, being in the Cup is sort of part of the DNA of this organization. It turns out we've made it to the playoffs 18 of the last 20 years, but that's not enough for us. We're dedicated to winning the Stanley Cup every single year. We think about it so much, we've actually put it on our badges, so we remember it every single day.
So you're going to do it this time, this next year?
Predicting the future is a difficult game, but yes, we're dedicated to do it.
Well, we have a relationship. Alaska Airlines has a relationship with the San Jose Sharks. Would you like to tell us how that came about?
Sure. You know, sometimes there's this intriguing backstory when you set up these partnerships, and sometimes it just sort of happens by natural business evolution. The Alaska Airlines San Jose Sharks one is more the latter than the former. Turns out a marketing agency reached out to us and said, hey, would you like to talk to Alaska? We went up to Seattle, spent a couple of business meetings with you guys, and it turns out not only did we have some shared business interests, but shared cultural values as well. Signed a deal in a couple of weeks. Usually doesn't happen that quickly, but when it does, that's a really good sign for a strong relationship.
Well, it seems like a really good fit. I understand that you've been making some initiatives to improve the fan experience here with the San Jose Sharks, and Alaska's been doing the same thing for several years. So what are some of the things you have on the front burner in that area?
Well, I think pretty much every organization either has an initiative to improve their customer experience or frankly should have an initiative to improve it. Part of the challenge is the people that are responsible for customer interaction are often inside the organization, and they have responsibility for people, process, or technology, but they're not customers themselves, so they don't know what the issues are. So one of the first advice I say to people is walk a mile in your customer's shoes. Fly your own airplane and act it like you're just a regular customer. Call into your call center. Try to buy a ticket to a San Jose Sharks game. Really feel like a customer, then you'll know what the issues are and so you can improve it. From our point of view, one of the things that we can do a better job of is communication. Sometimes we use language and lingo that we all understand, but confuses our fans and our customers. And so we need to switch it to things that are maybe obvious to them, not just obvious to us. Also, we do send a lot of emails. So one of the initiatives I want to do is go from maybe what might feel spam to some customers to more of a newsletter feel that's not just email but videos as well.
Something they would welcome in their
Exactly
inbox.
Right. Things that they want as opposed to maybe things that we wanted.
Well, you're here in the center of the tech world.
Yes, we are.
So do you feel extra pressure to do a better job in that area?
Well, Hasso Plattner, a majority owner, is the founder of one of the world's largest technology companies, so I got a lot of pressure there anyway.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, given that we're in Silicon Valley, our fans expect a certain amount of technology in everything we do. But if anything, I'm worried about the reverse. I'm worried that if we're not careful, technology dehumanizes us as an organization and gets us away from the customer experience. So let me give you a simple example. I think we were the first in Silicon Valley and maybe anywhere on the West Coast to go to mobile ticketing, all digital ticketing. So you don't have a physical ticket, it's on your phone. We're used to doing this on planes. It hasn't happened in sports until recently.
Really? Okay.
And for a large fraction of people in Silicon Valley, that's natural. They're used to buying things on their phone, they're used to boarding planes, et cetera. But we had a small and very vocal core that maybe didn't have a modern phone or was more comfortable with paper tickets. So we probably over-indexed on the digital the first thing, and this year we're coming back with an option that if you want, you can get paper tickets.
Go back old school.
Well, I don't think we want to call it old school. That seems somehow negative.
Maybe that's
traditional. How about that?
Yeah, so basically the concept you're talking about is, I've always described it as eat your own dog food. In other words,
we call it drink your own champagne?
Okay.
I don't really want to eat dog food.
Okay. Yeah, but go in and take a look at it from the customer's perspective and not just top down.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Outside in, not inside out.
So you've been here about 7 months,
Yes.
and you came here from SAP.
That's correct.
Can you tell us about that company? I always see that logo. I know it's a global software company.
Yep.
But I don't know what they do.
So you're right, SAP is global. It has near 100,000 employees in I think 60 some countries at this point.
Okay.
There's more than 100 different software products in its portfolio, all organized around making an organization run better. In fact, becoming best run is SAP's slogan, and so it's software to improve your finance department, software to improve your marketing department, software to improve human resources and how it works, or sales, et cetera. It's all in taking your business processes and improving it. Turns out it helps lots of different industries, banking, even sports and entertainment.
So the customer, the man on the street, generally doesn't understand or know what SAP is actually doing. It's in the background.
I would say most individuals don't know exactly what SAP does. In the marketing world, there's something called business to consumer, and SAP is more of a business to business kind of oriented, but it sells to people who themselves go to consumers, so it gets kind of complicated.
Oh, pretty cool. How did the San Jose Sharks come on your radar?
What do you mean, aside from the fact that I've been a season ticket holder for more than a decade and a fan since the organization came around?
Yeah, as a possible place to go to work.
Well, as it turns out, when I was the chief marketing officer of SAP, one of the things that I did is I led the naming rights for this building that we're in now, and the San Jose Sharks now play in the SAP Center. And maybe a bit of foreshadowing, the person on the Shark side that I dealt with most was the then chief operating officer, John Totora, who's now my co-president.
Okay.
So I've known about the organization as a fan and from a business perspective for a long time. But the idea of joining the Sharks didn't really come into my head until the majority owner, Hasso Plattner, called me up late in 2017 and said, I really think you and JT's skill sets are very complementary. I know you're a huge Shark fan. How would you like to be in the building every night rather than just 40 some nights a year? And of course, I jumped at it. And
That
said
was a
yes.
no-brainer.
Yes, exactly right. It's a passion
so cool.
job.
So how is this different than the job that you had at SAP?
You know, I think if you're a leader for any organization, it doesn't matter if it's a tech company, a retailer, or a sports organization, there's a lot of things that are the same. One of the things you have to do is build great teams. Another thing you have to do is set a compelling vision that your customers and your employees care about. You have to improve communication. I mentioned that a little bit earlier as well. So there's a lot of similarities. But there's something that's fundamentally different about sports that I love, and that is you're that much closer to your customer. In the software world, the person that buys your product is often not the person who uses your product.
Yeah.
There could be an IT department involved, there could be a procurement department involved. There's often, you're disintermediated is the fancy technical word.
Yes.
But here, you hear from your customers every single day and every single night when they're happy and when they're not so happy.
They're more happy when you win,
Well, of course they are.
and more unhappy when you don't win.
They have things to talk about no matter if you win or that you don't.
I got you. So you're the co-president of this big organization, this sports team, and I'm always curious as to the journey that someone takes, you know, from elementary school. This kid's in elementary school, and sitting in a classroom, and teachers looking out across the classroom. Which one of these kids is going to be a president of a sports team? Which one of these children is going to be a doctor? Which one of these children are going to be a politician? So tell me about your journey. I'm just fascinated in that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll step before
Okay.
the elementary school. So both my parents are European. They immigrated to the US.
Okay.
I'm the first person in my extended family to be born in the United States. I grew up in a relatively small suburban town in Virginia, in Southern Virginia. It was pretty small. Everybody sort of knows everybody else. Give you a sense how small, my high school graduating class was 13 people.
Wow.
Yeah, 13
Very
people.
small class.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be the co-president of a sports team. In fact, I wasn't really entirely sure what I wanted to do. I had this interesting combination of interest in technology, interest in science, and I loved to write.
So when did tech first come on your radar?
You ever seen the movie The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman?
Yes.
So in that movie, there's this compelling scene where a friend of the family, he says to Dustin, I'm going to give you career advice, and he says one word, plastics. So when I was 17, I had sort of an analogous situation. A cousin came in to visit from Europe and said, what are you going to do? And I gave him an answer kind of like I gave you, which was not very clear, and he gave me a one-word answer, which was computers. I hadn't seen the movie The Graduate then, but it had the same effect on me, and that's pretty much why I got into computers.
And then you went to University of Virginia, and did you study that in college? Was that your major?
Indeed. It turns out, at first, University of Virginia was a bit, actually almost scary for me.
Coming from a small high school.
Right. My first
goodness.
class, I think, was Chemistry 101, and there were like 300 or 400 people in it, and I had this, how do you do student-teacher interaction? But it turned out it was the best thing I ever did for me, because I got an engineering degree with a focus on computer science with a heavy dose of liberal arts. And I think in retrospect, and I'm not sure I really knew it at the time, what UVA really did is taught me how to think end-to-end, something that people sometimes call critical thinking.
What was your first job out of college?
My first job out of college, not my first job in college. Actually,
Okay, let's go there.
No, that's
First job
okay.
in college.
I've been working since I was 13 years old. My parents instituted this discipline in me, which I would call the work ethic, which is work is important, it's critical, it's something that you do. The other half of that is ethic, which means You work because it's the right thing to do. You're not doing it for your individual glory. You're doing it to improve the team, to improve the organization.
Improve the world.
Improve the world,
Your
that's
piece
right.
of the world, yeah.
That's right. I still actually have a sign in my office, if we were to go downstairs and check it out, that says, do the right thing, even when nobody is watching. And I attribute that to the way my parents raised
Isn't
me.
that the definition of integrity?
That may in fact be the definition.
I think that's
of
one
it.
of the definitions of it.
I'll have to borrow that the next time someone
please
asks me.
do. I stole it from someone else.
Borrowed with pride is the way
Yes.
I've been
Okay. That's better.
Okay.
Yeah. So what kind of jobs did you do when you?
So when I was an undergrad, and I actually went to grad school as well, I ended up having side jobs that were either manual labor. I tarred roofs for a while in the hot sun. Yeah, well, you got to learn a living sometimes.
No, I get it.
I discovered that I didn't like doing that in the 90-degree heat, so I got inside. I actually became a teacher's assistant for a while. I staffed the late night computer labs where people were cramming to try to deliver things as well. And I ended up working in Durham, North Carolina for an organization called the Microelectronics Center of North Carolina. Essentially, it's a kind of a research tank. And among other things, they were funded to try to figure out, is an object in the sky a space satellite? Is it some kind of other thing? I don't know. I was too young to really know, and part of the things were classified. I suspect they might have been looking for UFOs. We did some AI work. Fair enough. We did some AI work, and so there was voice recognition. I remember one of the sentences one of the professors was looking for is, please write, Mr. Wright, right now. So the same word sounds the same, but you have to have context to figure it out. So there were some fun research projects there.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And where'd you go from there?
Threw all my stuff in the back of the car and drove here to Silicon Valley.
Get to Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Okay. And your first company you went to work for here?
I went for what then was a very small computer company called Massbar Computer Company that ganged together thousands of processors to try to solve really tough technical problems. I was employee number 13, and we grew to several hundred employees as time went on.
And at some point you started your own company, didn't you?
Indeed. I've been lucky enough to be the chief executive officer, CEO of 3 startups, the last of which was actually acquired by SAP. That's how I ended up at SAP.
Very good. I'm a big fan of your blog, Management by Walking Around. Is that one of your management philosophies?
Indeed. I borrowed the phrase from Hewlett and Packard, the founders of HP. They write about it in their book called The HP Way.
Okay.
The general idea that says, as you become a boss, whether it's a first line manager or an executive, if you're not careful, you can lose touch of what's really happening in the organization. Information gets filtered up. In fact, you move away from the floor you started on, and you might go to higher floors or even to a different building. Sometimes people call that the ivory tower effect.
Yes.
And so to make sure you really know what's going on, and frankly, to improve your communication with everybody in the company, don't stay at your desk. Walk around, talk to people, find out what's really going on. Do it with customers. I mentioned earlier, walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah.
There's not really a set formula on how to do this, so it depends on your circumstances. It can be as simple as, if you're in charge of a call center, call support every once in a while and see what happens. It can be, don't eat lunch at your desk, because then you're inaccessible. Go to the company cafeteria and have lunch with people as well. After my startup got acquired by a larger company, I was worried about keeping the startup spirit alive. So what I did is I borrowed some of the startup ideas. I started having rooftop luncheons or informal shows where people bring in their favorite logo wear and stuff like that. Things that felt culturally different in a big company, but made us still feel like a startup even though we were acquired.
One of my favorite blog posts that were written by you was, are you open-minded?
Okay.
And it kind of hit me kind of hard, because I realized maybe I wasn't as open-minded as I fancied myself as being. Can you walk us through that?
Sure, it's actually one of my favorites as well. It was
Okay,
fun
good.
writing that one, not just people reading it as well. So the question is someone open-minded or closed-minded? And one of the challenges is, if you're closed-minded, you think you're open-minded, so it's hard to be self-aware.
Yeah.
So can you create some informal guidelines to sort of help you think about what it means to be open-minded or not? And one of the very first things to look at is, when 2 people disagree, how do you react? A closed-minded person, their first reaction is try to convince the other person they're wrong. I have facts that you don't have, therefore you're bound to be wrong. That's closed-minded. An open-minded person, their first reaction will be, why does that person think differently? Maybe they know something that I don't know. And rather than trying to convince them they're wrong and you're right, to try to better understand their position. And so the cultural aspect behind this is, and what I've learned over the years is, whenever I have some fiercely guarded truth in my head, whenever I'm certain about something, my first reaction is to ask myself, what information would cross my desk to convince me that I was wrong? And then and sometimes I ask other people, go find that information. Because if that exists, I know I'm going to change my mind. And that's how you become more open-minded.
Well, the thing I took away from that blog post was to ask myself the question, when I have a strongly held position, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. What would that mean?
Yeah.
How
what
would you
that
react?
mean? Yeah. What if I'm wrong?
Do you mind if I ask you back?
Yes.
So what did you decide?
I decide I'm wrong on a lot of things.
Okay.
I can tell you some things I've been wrong on. When somebody said they were going to sell bottled water, I thought they were out of their minds. I was wrong.
That's okay. I've been wrong tons of time myself as well. But that means the blog did its job. It got you to think about the concept. So.
Yes. That's cool. You have said that you lead an organization with a culture of experimentation.
That's
Could you
right.
explain that to us?
You know, if we were doing a Silicon Valley style interview, I would probably have used the phrase fail fast. That's jargon here in Silicon Valley. But the idea behind the culture of experimentation is none of us knows what's happening in the future. You can't predict hardly what's happening next week, let alone in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And so the traditional way of building a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year plan, people used to talk about 10-year plans when I first went to school, just doesn't work anymore. And doing the same thing over and over again is the wrong thing. There's an old line that says, what got you here won't get you there. And so what I want people to do is being willing to take a little bit of risk, try something out, experiment, figure out what works and what doesn't work. The things that don't work, stop that.
Yeah.
But document it so other people can learn from it. The thing that does work, do that a little more. And in the old way of the scientific method, learn from your experiments as you go.
So never just get set in your ways and,
Exactly right.
and just keep doing the same thing, whether it works or not.
If we were talking about individuals, I'd say dedicate yourself to a lifetime of learning.
I've spent the past couple of days wandering around your facility here and meeting your people.
Yep.
What an amazing group of people you have working for you. They're over there, standing there. Oh, there they are over there. And
Just for clarification, I work for them.
Oh, that's good leadership. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, what goes into your hiring decisions? How do you put together such a good administrative and management team?
So let me start with something different. Not long after I joined, we rolled out a new vision for our organization. We said that we want to pioneer the future of sports and entertainment. Now look, that's a really big statement, pioneer the future.
Yeah.
I would call that, with my background, a BHAG, B-H-A-G, which stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal.
Okay.
In order to get to that future, which we don't know what the future is, but we want to help pioneer it, right? We built a couple principles, some things that must be true about ourselves. We call those the pioneering principles. So an example is be fearless. We don't know what the future looks like, so go into the beyond like a pioneer would be that actually came out west. Another example of a pioneering principle will be trust each other. We're all in this together, so it's not about an individual. This is a team sport. Another example would be that we're all one team. There aren't multiple teams. Another example is we need to focus on achieving results. Along the way, we want to enjoy the journey, and maybe the most important of these 6 is follow the golden rule. So when we look to bring somebody onto our team, and we call it Team Teal, teal is our color and that's how we describe ourselves, we're not looking for somebody that has a particular background from a particular company, really that has a particular characteristics of they taught this course or they learned that. We're looking more for their style of interaction and whether they're indicative of these pioneering principles. Because again, we don't know the exact route to the future. We need everybody in the organization to help us get us there.
So this goes back to your culture of experimentation.
You got it exactly right.
Oh, very cool.
You can't really advertise for experimental-minded people. That sounds weird, though.
Yeah.
So
everybody would say I'm experimental.
that's exactly right. And they'd all say they're open-minded too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I would have failed that test until I read your blog.
There you go.
Who has been your most effective boss?
Who's been my most effective boss?
Well, we've been talking about leaders. So
We have.
who's been your most effective boss?
That would probably have to be my last boss, Bill McDermott, the CEO of SAP. The market cap of the company has essentially tripled. The size of the organization has essentially tripled. It's really grown it pretty dramatically. And if I think about all the lessons that he sort of taught, not just me, but many of us in the organization, it's dream big. It's really, if you don't dream it, it isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Don't settle for just a little bit more, but think about where you really want to go. And if you dream it, it can happen.
Who was your favorite mentor?
Oh, geez. Choosing a favorite mentor might be equivalent to asking who's your favorite kid. So, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you about my first mentor.
Okay.
My first mentor was named Ed. And one of the lessons that Ed taught me early on, he helped me go from being an engineer to being in sales and marketing. And one of the things he said is that people notice the disconnect between what you say is important versus what you actually do. Said another way is actions speak louder than words. And so if I say I want a culture of experimentation, if I say it's okay to take risk, I can't punish somebody when they fail, right? Because then they're going to avoid the risk. In fact, it's more than that. I have to go out of my way to celebrate risk-taking that didn't work out, by encouraging people to do that as well. A lot of times people say, I want something. I want people to be more perfect, but then they have typos in their emails. And so you have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
Set the example.
Don't ask anybody to do anything you're not willing to do yourself.
Well, that's a basic premise of good leadership. It's a big secret. Not too many people know that.
Unfortunately, I would say not enough people know it. That's right.
You've been relatively active at major speaking events on the speaker circuit.
I have.
Yeah, how much time did it take you to prepare for that?
You know, that really depends on what I'm talking about. If it's a topic that I've had a fair number of speeches that I'm really comfortable with, then I spend only a few hours, maybe as many as 10 hours. And mostly what I'm trying to do is personalize that content for the audience. If I go international, I want to talk about a local company and how they might be impacted that, or I want to research and find some quote that's in the local language that is appropriate to what I do. But if it's a new topic, one that I haven't done before, and I try to push myself into new topics all the time. Yes. I'm not one of those guys that enjoys giving the same speech over and over again. It's actually a fair amount of work. I typically start 6, sometimes even 8 weeks ahead of time. I get other people to help me do some basic research. I might say I'm not the most fun person in that, because I really take these things seriously and I put a lot of effort to it. I've never quantified the hours, but it's a lot of work.
Well, there's a little bit of fun to it because you related to me a story about word insertion into your speeches. You want to share that with our audience?
Indeed. So over the years, to make sure that I don't get too comfortable in these speeches, one of the people that has helped me out a lot, a guy by the name of Chris, invented a kind of device, which is just before I went on stage, or frankly, just before I did an interview, he would give me a word and challenge me to figure out a way to insert that word into the conversation. And sometimes the word would be pretty simple, like apple, but would have nothing to do with the content. And sometimes it would be a complicated word that you would think would be obvious, like asparagus, but more often than not, people don't even notice the word.
And he'd give it to you just before you went on stage?
Literally before I went on stage.
Yeah, so you didn't have any time to process it or
stuff
change
like
your
that.
notes or...
But that way, it was his way of making sure that I wasn't overly focused on going from point A to point V, but rather just talking in the moment based on what came out of my gut.
Speaking of your speaking events, you gave a speech in Germany when you were with with SAP and you were the Chief Digital Officer. And you talked about some futuristic things. And one of the things you talked about was how much change we're going to see in the next 10 years. And I fell out of my chair when I saw that. That speech is on YouTube, by the way, in case you want to watch it. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I hope you didn't really fall out of your chair. But
well, emotionally I did.
Okay, fair enough. So I think I remember the one you're referring to, and I start that speech saying that I want to talk about something that's somehow frightening or scary to people, which is the subject of change.
Yes.
Because we as human beings, frankly, fear change, and they're good evolutionary reasons. I mean, we're only a couple thousand years ago away from when change in our environment could really threaten our life, right? So most people, when they see change, they fear it. But change can actually be a force for good. And one of the characteristics of the era we're in now, and you can call this era the digital era or whatever you want, is the pace of change is dramatically increasing. There's a quote that I borrowed and then manipulated a little bit from a futurist, a guy named Ray Kurzweil, that said, we'll see more change in the next 20 years than we have in the last 1,000. And so if you look back 1,000 years and just imagine, I mean, none of us were around, but imagine how different life must have been. That was, I think, the Middle Ages, actually, roughly 1,000 years. Clearly, we're a lot different. If somehow the world's going to be that much different again in 20 years, that's a lot of change. And when I went through that, one of the things that science has shown us is humans, as our nature, tend to overestimate how much change will happen in the short term, and then we're disappointed when it doesn't, but we underestimate how much change is going to happen in the medium term. So when it doesn't happen in the first couple of years, we go, it's not really going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it sneaks up on us and happens in the 10 or 20 year mark.
So speaking of that, now I got to thinking after watching your speech, you're in the sports business.
I am.
And there's all this controversy and a recurring problem in pro sports with performance-enhancing drugs. That's not what I'm going to ask you about.
Okay.
But one of the things I'm reading that it's coming down in the future is the possibility of performance-enhancing genetics, genetic modification.
Okay.
Do you have any ideas on how the sports world is going to tackle that one?
Well, I guess the good news, as the co-president of a team, I don't have to make the decisions there. That's going to be a league-wide decision, but my guess is they're going to take similar approaches. Performance-enhancing genetic tuning is going to be treated in the same way as performance-enhancing substances. We'll say that as well. But if you're worried about that potential outcome, I got another one for you.
What's that?
I gave a talk more recently. I think it was a month or two ago. And in that talk, I talked about the future of sports of entertainment and saying, I don't know, but let's imagine some potential futures. And I showed a video, I don't know, like a 1-minute clip, you can probably also find this on YouTube,
Okay.
of robots playing soccer against each other. So imagine robots, and they're playing soccer against each other. There was a red team and a blue team, as I recall. And honestly, they weren't that good. They played a little bit like 4 or 5-year-olds play. And if you've ever seen 4 or 5-year-olds play soccer, they all chase the ball around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the ball goes right, they go right, the ball goes left, they go left, etc. But one of the things, when you do a little bit of background check, is the researchers showed that the AI, the machine learning as it's really called, behind these robots is improving at a pretty dramatic rate. We overestimate the change in the short term, but underestimate it in the long term. And that we're probably less than a decade away from when these robots will literally be as good as the best World Cup players. So let's say in the Olympics 8 years from now, we could have a robot team able to qualify based on their level of play. Will people pay to see a robot? I don't know. I mean, these are odd questions that we're likely going to have to grapple with.
Do you think there might be a robot league?
There probably will be a robot league. Esports is a big thing. Why couldn't robot sports be a big thing?
Wow, so it'd be a kind of like a programmer. Well, no, the machines teach themselves.
Exactly right.
I don't know what to tell.
But that's
I
the
don't
point.
know what to say.
The point is, you can't really prepare for a future that you can't predict.
Yeah.
So the goal is to make yourself more elastic, more pliable, more ready for the change when it happens, because we don't know whether it's genetically modified people, robots, or no change whatsoever that's going to be the future of sports in 10 years. And don't spend around figuring it out, because you can't figure it out. Just be prepared for whatever happens.
Well, fair enough. What do you do for fun?
Well, so actually the way I get inspiration for blogs is I got a lot of ideas floating through my head. Yeah. My team would probably tell you if they were open with you, which they should be, that I maybe have too many ideas, right? I like to think about things. I'm an experimental guy myself. And one of the ways I clear my head on weekends, almost always on Sundays, is I go for a hike. And I don't have as much time as I might have had years ago, so my hikes have gone from all-day hikes down to 2, 3, maybe 4-hour hikes at the most. But I find that when I'm out away from civilization, away from people, although civilization's a strong, away from sort of the day-to-day things, I can think a little bit clearly, and sort of the arc of the story that I want to tell in a blog starts showing up in my mind, and then I try to get back. Usually I'm tired, so I eat or drink something, and then I write my blog. That's my inspiration.
So, going on a hike, and come back, sit down, and write a blog.
Yeah, exactly right.
That is so cool.
That's not every week, but it's, half the weeks of the year.
So you've held these leadership positions in global corporations. And earlier you were telling me about the millions of miles that you've flown.
Yep.
So where is your favorite destination?
Look, as you mentioned, I've been on a plane a lot for the last decade. I think it's at the point that I went to 40 different countries in the last 6 or 7 years, and had some amazing experiences. Because I have family in Paris, I should probably give a shout out to Paris. It's a wonderful city, but I think the one that was most intriguing to me personally was probably Istanbul in Turkey. Sits right on the Bosphorus Sea. It's Asia on one side and Europe on the other. It's really incredible food, really incredible architecture. Love that. But lately I've been exploring the U.S. on Alaska, actually. Popped up to Seattle.
Alaska Airlines?
Yes, Alaska Airlines. Popped up to Seattle, been to Portland, went to Boise, headed over to Vegas. I'm using you guys to explore the world. Well, at least the U.S.
Well, we're honored to have you on board, both as a passenger and as a relationship with the team. It's outstanding.
That's very nice you say, and I'm honored as well. Thank you for the partnership.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Alaska Beyond. It's a pleasure having you, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks. We'll see you up at 35,000 feet.
There you go.